Richard.
And I'll give you 30 minutes, 10 minutes, and then the last six. Here we go. Three, two, one. You're live.
Hello, 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 Santa Barbara. It's your Chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. I've been off the air for a while, and I have to apologize. My good colleague Bridget Ginter was taking over for me, and Richard was helping as well. There was a death in my family, and it was kind of a prolonged thing. My mom died at 96.
Hmm.
So I was back and forth to New York as she was leaving the planet. So I apologize, and I'm back with you guys now. And you know, eh, what was really interesting to me was I heard a little spot about War of the Worlds, which is a play that I'm just dying to see at ECT no ETC ETC, and I'm just dying to see it. And the reason that I'm interested to see it is not only because War of the Worlds is such iconic presentation, but the choice of any kind of creative endeavor when it's resurrected, the period of time in which it was written, and then the period of time in which it's resurrected, they bump up against each other. And they really have quite a bit to say when they bump up against each other. And I have two performers here with me, and I want to talk about that concept. And what I mean by that is when something is revised, the word revised mean to put new life into. And what's so interesting about the War of the Worlds happening now is all of the diametrically opposed conflicts that we're seeing both in our nation and the world. So, War of the Worlds is about two worlds that are colliding. Right now we've got worlds that are colliding majorly in the Middle East, not only in our country with the political divide. As we speak, we have a terrific divide. Um, I couldn't get my car registered. The government is shut.
Hmm.
So there's these deep divisions that are rearing their heads. And, I want to talk about why the choice for the theater to choose War of the Worlds. Ensemble Theater Company is known for doing some really cutting edge things, and why they chose this work now is important to me to find out. And first of all, I'm going to introduce the actor who plays Harry Haywood in the presentation. Matthew Floyd Miller is here. He has been seen in ensemble before in Sleuth, It's a Wonderful Life. I saw him in a live radio play. It was in Measure for Measure, Fallen Angels, The 39 Steps. He's also been on Broadway. His Broadway credits are The Cottage, directed by Jason Alexander, and Not About Nightingales, directed by Trevor Nunn. Wow. Encircle in the Square, and The Invention of Love, directed by Jack O'Brien at Lincoln Center Theater, and off-Broadway credits, Another Part of the Forest at Peccadillo Theater, Letters from Cuba at Signature Theater, Regional Theater, 39 Steps, Coachella Valley Rep, Holmes and Watson, Laguna Playhouse, Designing Women. Let's see, Theater Squared and Arkansas Rep, Stupid Effing Bird, Theater at Boston Court, LA Drama Circle, Critics Circle Award, actually. Geffen Playhouse, my favorite theater in the world. I designed a Ibsen set. My background is in set design, and
Oh,
I
okay.
designed an Ibsen set for them. Yes, Prime Minister at the Geffen, Mystery of Irma Vep at the Falcon Antony and Cleopatra, and Private Lives at the Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival, The Pillowman at ACT Seattle, Theophilus North, world premiere at Arena Stage, Desire Under the Elms at San Jose Rep, and radio theater credits. Oh my gosh, Rich will be happy to hear about this. 9 productions with LA Theater Works. In film and TV, Co-starred in Queerbait, produced by Netflix and Kate Blanchett. On TV, played Vince Foster in An American Crime Story, Impeachment. Other TV credits: Barry, Welcome to the Chippendales, Hand of God, Major Crimes, Criminal Minds, Law and Order. And is it Tish? Is it Tish NYU graduate acting and MFA? It's
Yes.
Tish, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. In theater and graduate acting, very, very impressive. And we're so thrilled to have him perform at Ensemble Theater Company yet again. And then a colleague here, Jake Lawrence, is played by Brian Daniel Porter. He's an actor, voice artist, and filmmaker, and his portfolio is huge. But I have to say, what's so interesting is that I'm reading this and I was looking at his IMBA a little bit, and the video game part of his life is something we got to talk about. He next appears in Wings of Freedom with Eva Longoria and Nicholas Gazeltine. Uh, that's going to be 2026. Recurring on Nickelodeon's The Loud House and voicing Rossi 5 in the upcoming Destiny Rising. Variety magazine called him in 2024 the MVP of performers for leading the LA revival as the lecturer in Reefer Madness, which won Best Production from the LA Drama Critics Circle and won Brian, by the way, a nomination for Best Actor. He's performed with Center Theater Group, the Guthrie. Oh, yay. The
Mhm.
Guthrie. I also did a number of seasons with the Guthrie
Oh, very
designing.
cool.
Yeah, verisimilitude. I did a lot of verisimilitude, so that's how come I got into appraising Brian. Because, if you're asking, okay, let's do an early 19th century play, then they'd hire me to do the right, glassware, tableware,
Yeah.
linens, paintings, rugs. The total period piece. So they'd hire me to do that, and I did work at the Guthrie many seasons doing that. In the Geffen Laguna Playhouse, the Ordway, where he did Gershwin's songbook series, and the Playwright Center, the Reagan years, and many, many others in Los Angeles. And yeah, he's a Midwesterner. On top of it all, he's a
Yeah.
Midwesterner. He's from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't you know? Yeah. Of course, because you were at the Guthrie. Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And we're going to talk a little bit of that. So first, I'm going to throw it over to Matthew. Here's my main hypothesis,
Hmm.
Matthew, is the Ensemble Theater Company has chosen such an iconic piece about the clash of two worlds, both on a militaristically based clash and an intellectually based clash,
Hmm.
of which we are experiencing a lot right now. Seems like more than ever before in my lifetime. So as you're performing, I mean, let's say you get up in the morning and you're like, okay, let me just listen to NPR real fast, and you hear, the hostages are coming home, and yet there's terrific conflicts between Palestine and Israel still, and you're thinking, now I remember why that line needs to be delivered this way, let's say.
Mm. Hmm.
How
Hmm.
does your 21st century experience um impact or resonate with, um shall I say, resonate with Harry Haywood, your character?
Well, um, Harry, for folks who are listening to this and haven't seen the show, or they might not know, or they may not get a chance. I hope you get a chance to see the show. The characters that Brian and I and our co teammates Richard Baird and Ashley Morton play. Uh, Harry Haywood, Jake Lawrence, Freddie Fillmore, and Lana Sherwood. These are kind of like um, what we are is we're in a 1948 radio studio doing a 10-year anniversary recreation of the 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast that was done on CBS by Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater, which was, one of the perhaps uh, largest, if not the largest, hoaxes in, maybe American media or certainly radio history. So those characters, Harry Haywood, Jake Lawrence, Freddie Fillmore, Lana Sherwood, those are the characters we played in 1948 doing this reunion production of the War of the Worlds radio broadcast. So as far as the way, back to your question, what Harry Haywood thinks of it, Harry Haywood in a way is kind of just a framework for several other characters that I will play, that Brian will play, that Ash will play, Richard plays in the show, because we recreate both the 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast and we recreate the history around the controversy that broadcast created. So the way I look at specifically Harry Haywood himself, he's kind of just me. Because we don't really get a chance to know this. Brian's nodding his head. We don't get a chance to know these characters very well outside of those names. We get to know the characters that they play, or some of the characters they play a lot more in terms of the history of the War of the Worlds. How Matthew Floyd Miller feels about this, to get back to what you set up, Elizabeth. Uh, you know, uh, when I wake up in the morning, like many human beings in 2025 on planet Earth, I grab my phone first to see what time it is, and then to see, what is now happening in the world on this fine day. And I look at my social media. I might read the New York Times a little bit on the New York Times app. I might even look at YouTube a little bit. Um, uh, and what I think is profoundly parallel in the story of the 1938 broadcast of the War of the Worlds, uh, to what's happening in 2025, is the influence that media can have on the populace in terms of their point of view on what's happening in the world, the information that we are imbibing or taking in on a daily basis, and what we do about that information, and what it helps us believe, and what actions we then take based on that information. And uh, in 1938, the radio and the newspaper were the means of communicating on a broad scale to people all over the world. So when people read something in the paper in those days, uh, or heard something on the radio, they they certainly analyzed it, I would imagine, to a certain degree, to believe, say, how do I feel about this? What do I think this is true? Is this really happening? But I think there's probably also a lot of trust, like, well, it's in the paper. They said, so must be what's true. I heard this on the radio. This is what it must be really happening. Today, you look on your Instagram and you see a story, you hear a video, you read it, you listen to it, you go, well, that this person is giving me this information with a lot of passion behind it. And they're showing this little news clip that must be, there's a sense of a desire to believe that must be true because I'm looking at it on this very sophisticated media. So so the further parallel is, human beings were human beings in 38, human beings are human beings in 2025. And so when I think we're heavily influenced by what we take in these these electric information boxes, whether it's our phone or a TV or a radio and our computer. And so people are still, I think, and I include myself in this. This is not a pejorative thing about anybody in particular, but we can be gullible about things. We can take things at face value. Um, we can also take something that's actually factual and poo-poo it because we go, oh well, uh, it's that I don't believe that's real because there's all these other stories over here that I've heard that have been proved, have been proven false. So there's this, it's incumbent upon humans consuming media from from technology to ask themselves and do some investigating and asking some nuanced questions about what is real, what is factual, and what isn't. And to also understand that the sources from which they're receiving that, you know, so a news source, one would hope, would be unbiased, but oftentimes they're not. Um, on the other side of the scale, entertainment, when I'm listening to a stand-up comedian tell a joke on a talk show or on a podcast or whatever it is, uh, I have to understand that that is a stand-up comedian. It's not necessarily someone from whom I'm intended to take factual information, but rather a point of view and an opinion. So that's a long spiel based on what you said, Elizabeth, but that's kind of my fresh uh, take right off the bat.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of summarize a few things and then throw some things your way. Um, First of all, you talk about, I was talking about the history of polarities that is implicit in War of the Worlds. It's plural, two worlds are colliding. On the other hand, what we have here with your redo or rehash, revitalization of the play is an atmosphere in which the compilation of polarities is actually both insidious and underlying our understanding of media because of AI. And so what we have is before anyone understands, oh yes, this is something that the left has produced and this is something the right has produced. What we're not quite understanding is how those things are now compiled because of artificial intelligence when we ask a question of our devices. That's first of all. So we have even though maybe 2 years ago we had an idea that from the get-go from 1938 when Orson Welles did War of the Worlds, we had a huge investigation even on a congressional level of what media could do and should do and should not do. Right now, it's exacerbated because we have that going on, but we also have this little oh, I'm seeing you're wearing a hat, which is called Deus Ex Machina. There is
Deus ex machina.
there's a God in the machine, and it's called AI,
Mhm.
right? And so the other point I wanted to bring up, and then maybe Brian can help us, who is also a performer in the show. You mentioned the real backlash against talk show stand-up commentary. And I have to say, my I was in school in my undergraduate years. I was in school at Tufts in Boston, and I can remember my favorite class as 17th century satire, and I loved listening to the witticisms of the late 17th, early 18th century political Jonathan Swift, Alexander Pope, those people who were the stand-up comedians of the era talk about the and react to the climate. And I will say that it's an amazing thing to be talking with two creatives that you might not even know it. I mean, this is the thing. I've been appraising works of art for almost 30 years now. All of the artists that I've met during a 30-year period of appraising, some of them understand they are like little antennas picking up on the currents of whatever's happening in the world. They may not even know it in some cases, but they're picking up like I say, little antennas on the top of the Empire State Building. They are picking something up that's carrying through the corpus of the whole entire building. That's what the role of the artist is, basically, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
I see that that the folks that are doing, the commentaries, the satire, they have just as much, if not as important a role as they ever did. Um, and I think that's why there's such conflict around them. The history of satire, the history of laughing at something to pull it down is such an important part of conflict in on our stage, on our world stage. So so that's sort of what I'm thinking is that this is such an interesting moment for you all as creators because I can't help but think of all of the different diverse threads that one art form on stage can pull together as it's doing with your production of War of the Worlds. And by the way, I just want to give a shout out before we go over to Brian to talk about what his feelings are about this conflict inherent in War of the Worlds. The performances are Wednesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Fridays and Saturday, 8 p.m., Sundays at 2 p.m., added performances Saturday, October 18th at 3, Wednesday, October 22nd at 2, Saturday, October 25th at 3, and it's at the New Vic, 33 West Victoria Street. And I'm thrilled to say that ticket prices are extremely reasonable. Patrons 35 years and under are always $35. Student tickets are $25. Single tickets are available, reasonable, and I would definitely, I've spoken to this ticket office many times. They are very agreeable. They'll tell you the ranges, and the ranges are incredibly reasonable, and you can see when you can come and see the play. You'll like it. Parking is easy. The restaurants are cool right around there. You can't miss it. Can't miss a good evening. Okay, now I want to just quickly go over to Brian. We introduced Brian Daniel Porter. He plays Jake Lawrence. And uh, your thoughts on why Ensemble is doing War of the Worlds now and what that means to a consumer of media today in 2025, Brian.
Yeah. So I first of all just want to preface saying that it's really just genuinely a really fun theatrical experience. So just from having a scary fun time in terms of the Halloween season, bare minimum it is entertaining, which I think any show has an obligation to do. So let's just put that out there first, that it's a very entertaining show. You'll have a lot of laughs, you'll get scared a couple of times, but beyond that, I brought up, or it was brought up that I'm from the Midwest. When I went to school in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota, we were taught to not use Wikipedia as a reference for our essays because Wikipedia
Oh yeah.
was a site, yeah, that we know that anybody can access and anybody can change the information. And, we all kind of rolled our eyes and were begrudging about it and would usually use Wikipedia as kind of an information reference point of like, oh, that's kind of where I should start looking for reference points. And then we would find some legitimate reference ones at the end of the essay. Disinformation training is been existent prior to, the kind of climate that we're in now, and it certainly existed before. Another commentary on it is Orson Welles got a lot of flack for some of his commentary on William Randolph Hearst through Citizen Kane, where he basically, in the character as Citizen Kane, says like, you want to know what's going on, read it in the papers. And it's said tongue in cheek because the idea is that Hearst was kind of controlling the concept, and so there was already media literacy being kind of taught at that point. And so, you bring up AI as a topic. I think that AI is something that is very scary right now, but I think that it's just going to create a new era of us having to interpret, yes, what is real and what's not real. And certainly something that is a message of our show and that we're hearing a lot lately is you need to question what you hear in the news. You need to, vet the information and try to get an honest source. And then there is a sort of next level bit of that because it is kind of like, okay, so then how can you trust any information? And I think that what we are going to need to see as a society is how we can reconnect as individuals outside of this media landscape to see the humanity amongst the people that are our neighbors. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I do know that this show seems to highlight both that, people will believe a lot of stuff, and that we just have a certain responsibility to challenge censorship in that field. I also think that censorship is interesting because I think in today's culture you could probably say anything you want. The question is whether or not it'll actually get to an audience anymore. And that's why network TV is still so important because it's one of the only things that still accesses millions and millions of people no matter what. And so I think that's kind of the next step is figuring out how we can not live in these social enclave bubbles and figure out how we can really converge them in places that feel safe and bring people together.
Okay, so I want to talk more about this challenging censorship idea. I think that's fantastic what you just said about challenging censorship, and that there seems to be a platform that you can kind of say whatever you want. On the same token, you have to say it within the right bubble,
Mm.
like a little cloud in a comic strip has to be in the right bubble in the right square.
Yeah. I mean,
Mm.
literally algorithmically, if you want your video on social media to be seen amongst millions of people and therefore maybe give you money or do whatever you want for that thing, you have to have certain hashtags and trends that are set established audiences for your message that are going to
Mm.
absorb it. So the algorithm is not set up to bring new messages to different people. It's set to just
Mm.
reinstate the same message to the same social group.
Right.
That's interesting. So it's sort of self-reinforcing. I mean, I was kind of giggling about Brian Daniel Porter um, being a video game noise maker.
Yeah.
And so, just out of interest, I mean, how does that work? Because I can't think of any other tool that is actually not only a tool, but a learning device, an information system, and a world creator.
Oh, you mean just through the medium of video games?
Yeah.
Oh goodness, yes, 100%. And honestly, I would say that the video game culture is one of the things that gives me just great hope amongst young people in the future, and not even young people. I'm 32, which is young by certain standards, but I have friends that are in their older years, certainly that play video games. And there's no question about I don't know, identity politics and everybody gets along in the video game sphere. I don't really think politics is really ever a climate. I think that I could probably talk video games anywhere in America and people would be excited about it, which is something I love being, just a vocal participant in it. As a voice artist in that capacity, I don't have much say over necessarily which projects I get cast in. But what I will say is that I love how that community continues to get funding because I guess capitalism serves it well, but all the titles are all really great storytelling with really diverse characters, employs, hundreds if not thousands of people. And so I don't know. I don't see I don't produce them, but I don't see much censorship happening in the video game field, other than I guess, indie games trying to get funding, but art's always been that.
You know what's so interesting? I think what we're talking about with War of the Worlds and also with your background in video voiceover and also many other forms of communication. But the the in the so how do I explain this? So we've got this approach of reality, and as Matthew was saying, how do we approach reality in a way that we're consuming it with the right mix of skepticism and welcomeness? So we've got this idea of reality. Is it really real? And what do we mean when we say real? And then we've got the whole other creative world, which enforces and emphasizes the real world. And that is a world in which terrific mythologies are consistently being invented and created, like they were in 1938 when we had the myth of the Great War of the worlds. And so I don't know, can y'all reflect on the maybe the strength of the myth that's lasted this long? So we're talking since the 30s when Orson Welles, had his Mercury Theater broadcast. It's lasted that long. It's been so important that everybody's, no matter what age, they will recognize the myth of the War of the Worlds. What do you think Wells was capitalizing on? Obviously, it was the period of advancing into World War II
Mhm.
and all of the issues that were happening around polarization of opinions and also polarizations on, dare I say it, immigrant issues.
Mhm.
And it was interesting. I was saying to you both, I've been away from Santa Barbara on and off now for a couple of months, helping my mom who's leaving the planet. She was 96, but she was a young girl,
Mhm.
not yet a teenager. And my grandparents and my mom came over from Germany. And this was right before, my mom was born in 1929. So when she was 5, 6, 7 or so, she was walking to school with her first language being German. And she's living on Amsterdam Avenue, New York City. I remember her saying she recalled how she would be stoned and people would make fun of her accent. And, the German thing was not a good thing to be. Then that her father's home was raided. Uh,
What year was that, Elizabeth?
so we're talking right around the period of the War of the Worlds.
So
That pre
just before the Second World War. She was
Yeah, yeah.
because be- because she was because she was German, or because was she Jewish German, or was she just German, and there was a sense that uh it
It
was
it could have been both, but the issue was that she not only spoke with an accent, but she spoke German, and she came from an area of New York City that was called Germantown, and there was sort of a foment, whether or not it was the same sort of thing of, which side are you going to fall on? Are you going to be an American or are you going to be a German?
I see.
But we're talking about in my mom's generation that this was such an important in the 30s.
Hmm.
That was what's going on is this and not to mention the Japanese and all the other ethnic groups in this country that were being marginalized. But I'm I'm thinking about that and the concept in mythology of the other,
Hmm.
whether the and capital O, the other being another world, another race, another other, and so you've got a huge conflict here in War of the Worlds, and that there's another whole humanoid, is it even? Species?
I don't think it's
No.
ever specified. Yeah, but
Yeah.
in the story, interestingly enough, and again for anybody that doesn't know that with after folks heard the radio show, they thought it was some folks thought it was really happening, and some folks when they heard the words Martian and Martian invasion, their brain transposed that to Germans because
Yeah,
we were in 38, we were about to plunge into the Second World War was just beginning and they hadn't invaded Poland yet, but I think that there was the idea that that was just about to happen. And so I just by I think virtue of the fact that people could make that switch in their minds, even though it wasn't Martians, it was Germans. There's always I mean, certainly now there is a fear of fascism. There's a fear of a dominant culture invading, taking over, dominating society, and there was that clearly that same fear then by virtue of that transposition of what was really happening with the radio show. So uh, yeah, I think that that's a pervasive, sadly, a pervasive theme in the world.
It is, but it doesn't always have the kind of impact it does now. And it didn't, it had a huge impact on the groups that were termed other in the mid to late 30s as well,
Hmm.
and then because of the onset of the Second World War. But Brian was about to say something. Go ahead, Brian.
I'm so sorry. I really do have a 1:45 p.m. I'm also an apartment manager and I have to go do an apartment show. 1:45 p.m. And so I got a bolt. But this has been so lovely.
Well, fantastic. Just one final comment. You were about to say something in regards to when Matthew was talking about the this idea of mythology and fascism, et cetera. You were about to plunge in. Just give us a quick take on how do you play that?
Yeah, I think that War of the Worlds to me is has been so long lasting because the world was so convinced of this crisis. And to me, it's actually really about how this alien is like so non-humanoid that it brings everybody together or not together. It kind of makes our human relationships irrelevant beyond we are a human species and we are basically going to get decimated by this other thing. And so I think that the story itself is lasting because it really creates a scenario where it's just human beings, ideally looking out for other human beings, but figuring out what it is in that crisis. And we see that play it out in a lot of zombie films these days. A lot of zombie things are actually, sure, about scary things, but are actually more about the exploration of what happens when we really are just left to having to utilize human connection to survive. And I think that that is a storyline that has been just as mythologically resonant and pervasive and long lasting as even the sort of I don't know radio misinformation aspect of it.
Okay, thank you. So that gives us a more positive look on, why War of the Worlds now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Brian, and
Guys,
thank you,
thank
and
you so much. I appreciate
carry
Brian.
on. And Matthew, stick around because I've got a couple of other questions for you.
Sure.
Um, yeah. So, as far as I was really interested to see that you performed in a play called Letters from Cuba,
Oh,
and
nobody's ever asked about that in 25 years. So I'm really delighted that you're asking about it.
yes, and I wanted you to reflect on that, especially now.
Well, it it might sound like it was a particularly political play when in fact it wasn't so much. It was written by the late great playwright Maria Irene Fornes, and she both wrote it and directed it. And we did it in the early days of the off-Broadway company, Signature Theater Company, which specializes in, or they at one point did specialize in an entire year of one playwright's works over the entire season. And uh, really, I mean, it was a Irene wrote it a bit about her childhood. I mean, based on her experience of her childhood growing up. She was Cuban, growing up in Cuba, and then she came to the U.S. at some point. I don't remember the specific history of when she came and how that came about, but uh, Letters from Cuba was really, it was about these two roommates living in New York, and they have this lovely young Cuban girl who's their third roommate, who's a dancer, and juxtaposed to a story of a father and his young son in Cuba talking about life, really. It was as Irene's plays, or some of her plays, I should say, tended to be. It was almost a poem in a way more than it was a play. I'm not saying all Irene's plays
Hmm.
were poems; they certainly were not. But this was very much uh, uh, almost a hazy memory of something for her, I think. Um, Yeah, that's about the best I can describe it. Uh, but it revolved around this these three roommates, one of whom was this, a young Cuban girl, and then perhaps it's been so many years now. I think she's remembering back to, family members in Cuba, and there's a father and son talking about life and, the world from their perspective in Havana.
I want to also ask you a question that has to do with how you take direction. So,
Very badly. No, I'm kidding.
so, my sister, who's 12 years younger than I am, she is a actress, and has worked in Chicago and New York. And she tells a joke. She married her agent, by the way, um, which was convenient. But this is years ago. But she tells a joke that she's in her apartment and she kills her husband, and the police come and say, we're barricading the door, and we need to talk to people that knew you because this is a heinous crime. And the next person that knocks on the door is her agent, and she says to the police, "My agent, he came to the house." So she tells the same story about the directors over the years, that some directors actually think that what her opinion is absolutely no good at all. And then some directors just say, okay, you actors, what do you think? And you go with it, and I'll sort of edit it at the end of the day. So what style do you gravitate towards?
Well, I've worked with all different kinds of directors, and uh, there is a there's honestly a benefit to working. I mean, benefit, is that the right word? Uh, I've been in shows that have been wonderful, uh, uh, and directed in very different ways, from what one might call a bit more dictatorial to ones that might be a lot more collaborative, which is what the way I would contextualize the experience with War of the Worlds, the Panic broadcast that we just did with Jamie Torcellini directed the play, a very good friend of mine and a director who is very playful and collaborative. And in a play like we're doing, it's very important. It was very it really worked to the benefit of the play because we're also kind of discovering what it was as we did it. Um, I I like I like a director uh, who's got some idea of what they want, but is also like, what do you think? Is definitely open to the collaborative spirit. Um, I also am quite fond of directors. I've had experiences where I've auditioned for a play and um, been rehearsing a scene, and the director lets you go and play and discover uh, uh, and follow your impulses and see where they take you. And then will almost be like a little bit of a little bird in your ear saying, yeah, 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 I think he really wants to this, or I think you really wanted that. Yeah, 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 exactly. Go there. Kind of fans the flames of your impulses and your instincts that they think are on the money, or that they see where you're going. In that way, it helps you feel confident about your what you're doing and what your impulses are, as opposed to going like, no, 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 it's not gonna, no, no, that's no, don't do that. It's this. Um, uh, the more what I would say, and again, dictatorial is a very strong word. I don't think I've ever worked with a director who was a real jerk and was really uh, uh, um, so strict that it squelched somebody's creativity. But their directors will come in and say like, um, so you're gonna have you be here and here and here by this point, or in this for this speech or what have you. And in those cases, I'm happy to say that those I had a tremendous amount of respect for those directors and the work that they've done, and I'd seen the results of the work that they've done. So I knew that, well, if so and so is telling me to do X, Y, or Z, they probably got a really good reason for doing that. You know, uh, I can even say, for example, I did the television show. This is not a play, but television show American Crime Story, and um, I was playing the role of Vince Foster, who was Bill Clinton's White House counsel who committed suicide. And apart from that particular piece of the story, there was just a moment in one of the scenes where I'm talking to Sarah Paulson, who's playing Linda Tripp, and I'm leaving the office, and I thought, well, maybe I should take this line over my shoulder as I'm walking out. And I said to Ryan Murphy, the director, I said, like, Ryan, what if I try this line over my, he goes, no, you say the line here, and then you turn and you walk out. And I was like, okay, no problem. And he wasn't mean, but he was very direct and very like, no, this is what I want. Okay. Well, in the final analysis, when I got to see what came out in the show, I was like, yeah, Ryan's idea was a lot better than my idea was. So, and television and film is a different animal because things are cut together in a way that you have no control over. But certainly when you're doing a play, oftentimes, if a director says, hey, I want you to do this, this, and this, and you trust them enough, you know that you trust their aesthetic. My job is to pour my inspiration, my creativity into that shape, that form, that choice, and give it organic life. So,
How interesting. And you answered my second question was, direction that is on stage versus direction that is for television. And you're saying it's both worlds are similar but different. And I just thank you very much for coming on, Matthew
sure.
Floyd Miller. And just another shout out, War of the Worlds is called the Panic Broadcast. It's 95 minutes, no intermission. It runs through Sunday, October 26th, starting at 2 p.m. at the New Vic. And this is going to be a must-see ensemble theater company. And we talked today with Matthew Floyd Miller, and we talked with Brian Daniel Porter. And I'm so impressed with both of your resumes and also with what you've said about the play. We talked a lot today about why War of the Worlds now and
Mm,
what the panic was about and what it still is about and why it's a prescient play. It was a prescient play in 1938 and it's a prescient play in 2025. And I'm super, super interested to see how it goes. Um, Also, just so that you know, ticket prices are extremely reasonable. $35 and up, and student tickets are $25. There's always a deal. You can always call the box office. And I want to give you the box office number, dear listener. It's 805 965 5400. 9645400. And when I talked to the box office yesterday, they were really starting to sell out. And I would say if you guys are interested to see the play, and you should be, I think it's going to be, and like Brian was saying, it's raucous, it's fun,
yes,
and
it's a lot
it's
that's one thing I would reiterate that we're talking about serious stuff here, but the play is really fun. It's very funny. It's kind of it's a delight. It's a delight to experience from what folks say, and I think they're right. It's fun to have.
So, so, like I said, I was talking with yesterday morning, I was talking with the box office, just sort of getting an idea of the lay of the land. And then they are the first couple of weekend performances. I think they're almost gone. And so, get on the ball and get your tickets at 9655400. And the play has matinees as well. We've got Sundays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 8 and Sundays at 2, and then a couple added performances. So, if you want to bring a school-age child or a student, this is the exact time to do so. Very important to talk about the challenges of our day in regards to media, censorship, mythology, dominant culture, the power of the media. The reason that the play lasted this long was as Brian was saying, the premier supposition that we are all humans and in it together.
Mhm. Absolutely. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Matthew, thanks so much for being with us today. I sure appreciate it.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, guys. See ya. Bye.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Richard. You too. Bye-bye.